Manager Walt Weiss confirmed on Sunday that Ronald Acuña Jr., like we all thought, will lead off this year. But who bats behind him is a really interesting question. Let's talk about it. Yes, welcome on in to Braves Today, your daily source for news, notes, and updates on your Atlanta Braves. I'm your host, Lindsey Crosby, award-winning baseball writer and podcaster. You can follow me on social media at Crosby Baseball. You can find all of my written work, bravestoday.com. That's the Braves Today Substack, as this is both a podcast and a newsletter. We're proudly part of the Believe Podcast Network and presented to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app or go to FanDuel.com to get started. The Braves played 2 games over the weekend, so we got to see a couple people get in the lineup. John Heel, Alex Lodis playing later in both of those games. We saw J.R. Ritchie pitch in front of StatCast. I want to talk about a lot of that stuff. But before we get to that, Walt Weiss on Sunday made the announcement, the proclamation, something that we all kind of expected was going to be coming, right? That Ronald Acuña Jr. will be the Braves' leadoff hitter. And the quotes that Walt Weiss said to the media, like the reasons that he gave, kind of makes sense if you think about it. Quote, when that lineup turns over, man, I want it to be a gauntlet. It starts with Ronald, and it's tough to catch your breath. That's the plan. So the pressure that this puts on opposing pitchers is something that Walt Weiss wants to focus on. He also said that some of this, too, comes down to the player, right? It's the familiarity, it's the comfort aspect to it. The other quote there, I pulled out of his media availability, quote, the leadoff spot has become part of his identity. He's been really, really good at it, and I just happen to like him there too. I've written before about optimizing the lineup, and when I did all of the different models, I had Ronald at 1 and somebody else behind him at 2. And the thing that I learned in there, and I know this is not the best way to start a podcast because I'm about to spend 15 minutes talking about this, but the thing that I learned is the difference in your your ideal optimized lineup and your worst possible lineup comes out to something, at least for the Braves this year, it came out to just under 30 runs in an entire season. Like, not nothing. You don't want to give away 30 runs. But in the grand scheme of 162 games, for it to matter once every 5 games is a little bit tough. I know that's not the best way to get you to listen to this podcast, and I apologize. I just wanted to kind of make that point up front. But I do think the decision for number 2 is a really interesting call because you've got a couple options here. We saw the Braves put Drake Baldwin in the lineup on Sunday. He hit behind Ronald Acuña Jr. And to me, there's 2 different options when it comes to the identity of that player. The first option, and kind of what I think a lot of us assumed they were going to go with, is what I'm going to call the on-base multiplier argument, right? You put Jurickson Profar there. Last year, he was electric over the course of the entire season. Walk rate over 10%. Or he was very good. But in the month of August, I mentioned this I think last week when we talked about that hernia he had. The month of August, he hit .295 with a 183 WRC plus, a 17.4% walk rate, and a 40% hard hit rate. I don't think that is a realistic expectation to have for the entire season. But every year but one since 2020, Jurickson Profar has had a walk rate of at least 10%. And he doesn't whiff a ton. He doesn't strike out a ton. He's putting balls in play. Now, he's not the best power hitter, but the idea behind putting Jurickson Profar in the lineup behind Ronald Acuña Jr., there's a few things that this would do, okay? Thing number 1 is it maximizes Ronald Acuña Jr.'s stolen base value because pitchers now need to throw more strikes. Because you have a guy that is not going to chase, and he's going to take the walk if you give him the walk. And if you do, Ronald's on second base anyway. So you need to attack Jurickson Profar. You need to get him out. You need to throw him strikes. And that typically means it's going to be a little bit easier for Ronald to have, the green light and to run. He said that he feels fully healthy, and in winter ball, he wanted to get full confidence in that knee. And he went for 11 for 11 on stolen bases. He has said he plans to run this year. There's no hesitation there. I don't think we'll see 73 steals again, but I absolutely do think that an on-base guy being back there is going to help Ronald. So that's argument one. It makes sense, right? Argument two is having an on-base guy and somebody who has very good contact, like a high-contact, line drive-oriented bat, like Jurickson Profar is, means you're going to have a lot more first and third situations early in games, right? Ronald gets on first. If he steals second, a single has him either at third or scoring. Even on a single, Ronald's often going to go from first to third. And so being able to manufacture that pressure situation is very helpful towards scoring runs. We remember that 2023 season where it felt like Atlanta was scoring a lot of runs very early. Getting first and third with, no outs, something like that. In the first inning, you're almost guaranteed, as much as you can be in baseball, to score a run with runners on first and third, no outs. And again, Profar's whiff rate, 88th percentile in the league. His strikeout rate was 82nd percentile. So even when he wasn't getting a hit, he was putting the ball in play, making defenses work. If Ronald gets a good enough jump, even on an infield grounder, you're not going to get him at second. So either way, having the on-base oriented guy helps. But the third thing is keeping the line moving ahead of Matt Olson. This is the big reason, I think, to put Jurickson Profar at the number 2 hole. And I'm not saying definitively I want to do one thing or the other. I'm giving both options here. Matt Olson took 724 plate appearances last season. Over half of them were with the bases empty. 392 of them were with the bases empty. He hit 29 home runs. 21 of them were solo shots. He had 170 hits. 90 of them were with nobody on base. When you put the team's 2 best on-base options in the lineup in front of Matt Olson, the odds are pretty good that somebody will be on base for him. You're not going to have this situation again where he comes up to bat and the bases are empty. Now, granted, if depending on what happens on the bottom of the lineup, that could impact it a little bit, but having 2 high on base guys here absolutely helps you have Olson just driving tons of runs because there's going to be somebody on most of the time, it feels like, right? Ronald had a 417 on base last year. Profar had a 353 on base last year. It feels like the odds are good. One of them, more often than not, is going to be able to get on, right? So the argument for Profar is, in essence, you're stacking the bases. You're giving Ronald more opportunities to run because you have a guy that, one, is really good at not chasing and prolonging an at-bat if you're not throwing strikes. And if you are throwing strikes, he's really good at being able to take pitches until he gets to 2 strikes and then making contact, right? But there is another train of thought, and we saw Walt Weiss do this on Sunday. We'll break it down next, right here on Braves Today. But first, today's episodes are brought to you by our friends at Slam Getaways. Bucket list bus trips designed for fans who love the game and want to travel in style. All these trips depart from Atlanta. You get field level tickets, 3-star hotels, daily breakfast, a full slate of ballparks, and other activities. Because each of these trips, whether it is May to Florida, June to the Midwest, or July to the Northeast, get 2 Braves road games, appearances by former MLB players, giveaways, fun side trips to places like the Louisville Slugger Museum, Bull Durham filming locations, and a bunch of other ballparks in the route. So If you're retired or a baseball nut, it's a great summer vacation. If you want a fantastic parent-child summer adventure, this is a stress-free way to do it. So, you can reserve your spot now with a small deposit. Go to grandslam-getaways.com to make this summer a grand slam. Again, grandslam-getaways.com to let the baseball adventure begin. Welcome back to Braves Today. Lindsey Crosby. Ronald Acuña Jr. is leading off. We know that. Let's talk about the other option besides an on-base guy like Jurickson Profar. And again, we saw this on Sunday. Drake Baldwin was in the 2-hole. He hit a home run in the game, so that was nice. But this, instead of being the on-base multiplier argument, this really is the damage amplification argument, okay? Rather than just creating traffic on the base paths, you're just going for immediate damage. And rather than trying to stack the deck so that Matt Olson can drive the run in, you're just letting the guy in the 2-hole drive the run in. And the good thing is, a healthy Ronald, even if you're not getting an extra base hit from the guy that's here, in this case, we're talking about Drake Baldwin, Ronald can still score from first. We saw him score from first on singles or on extra base hits all the time, right? Even if he doesn't steal second or third, he likely can still score on a good enough batted ball, and he can get to third on a single, whatever. But Drake Baldwin, here's the reason why I think Drake Baldwin works well for this. This may not be super replicable with a lot of other people on the roster, but I think Drake Baldwin, it's great. His walk rate was kind of average, and that could always improve, right? But he's the rare hitter that both had a really good hard hit rate, like 80th percentile mark of 49.6%. Every other time he put a ball in play, that thing was scalded. He has both that and a low whiff rate. 80th percentile, 19.5%. So he both hits the ball often and hard. And this is, that's a really useful combination of abilities to have with a guy on base that is speedy, that can steal, that can run the bases really well. Because now, obviously, he's putting a lot of balls in play. He's not striking out. One of the worst things that can happen to you is the strike him out, throw him out, double play. Drake Baldwin, he does strike out. Everybody strikes out in baseball, but he's not striking out as much as some of the other power hitting options in the lineup, like a Matt Olson or Austin Riley or guys like that. If Drake Baldwin wasn't available, I don't know if this would be the route to go. But with Drake Baldwin being such a unique hitter, this might be what Atlanta does. You put Drake Baldwin number 2 because he's not going to whiff a ton. He's going to get balls in play, and he's going to hit balls hard frequently for extra bases, or would be good enough for extra bases if he wasn't, slow. Like, he's not a fast player. But it works out well behind Ronald. Now, the one concern you do have here is both Drake Baldwin and Matt Olson are lefties. And Walt Weiss has essentially said that Matt Olson is the number 3 hitter. So if you sign up to do this, you are deciding to have back-to-back lefties in the lineup. Now, the good news here is, how do you attack a left-handed hitter? You go to a left-handed reliever. The good news is both Baldwin and Olson can hold their own against left-handed pitchers. Last year, among Braves regulars, guys who got in plenty of games, Drake Baldwin had an 818 OPS, was second on the team. Olson was fourth with a 792 OPS. And Walt Weiss addressed this when he was talking to the media. He said, that's the point of the lineup where a left-handed reliever is likely going to come into the game. You can bet the house. And I'm not saying this is exactly how it's going to be, and he means how the lineup's going to be in the regular season. But I want to get a look at Baldy and Matty hitting back-to-back. They want to see if this works. And, honestly, I see it. I see how this could make sense. Because really here's the thing. I said at the top, whoever bats here, this doesn't meaningfully change the run production exponentially, right? how well Austin Riley hits is still going to matter a lot more for runs scored this year than if you have Profar second or Baldwin second, right? But what I think this does, like, this decision impacts the non-statistical stuff, the perception of the Braves, and what opposing teams prepare for. Like, Acuña's back in the leadoff spot, and that is very much the way that the Braves want to attack opposing pitchers and put you on your heels from the very first pitch of the game. The question is, what kind of pressure do the Braves want to apply next? Because if you want relentless traffic, you want long innings, you want to run a pitch count early and get into the pen, Jurickson Profar makes a ton of sense. He's good at taking pitches, he's good at drawing his walk, you're not going to get him to chase a ton out of the zone to get a strikeout. He is the choice to prolong the first inning, and then every time he comes up subsequently, but get that starter's pitch count up early to hopefully get into the pen early, which has ramifications not only in that game, but for the rest of the series. But if you want to go with immediate damage and putting the opposing team in the hole on the scoreboard in the first inning, Drake Baldwin makes a ton of sense here. Because he is able to immediately drive that guy in. And here's the hard part about 2023, is you kind of did both. Different coaching staff, obviously, but Ozzie Albies had 78 games in the 2-hole. Matt Olson had 68. And then like Michael Harris had 13. Kevin Pillar had a game. Austin Riley had 1 game. Eddie Rosario had 1 game. Like, they got a little wild with that at times. But Olson jumped back and forth between second and fourth, and he did better batting cleanup. He's going to be third this year, though. You've done both things. It all kind of comes down to how you want to attack opposing teams, right? Is your goal to put them behind early? Is your goal to get into their bullpen early so that if it's a close game, you can take the lead if you have the lead? It's how you want to approach the game and the series, right? They're going to test this in spring. They're going to try both things. They're going to go back and forth. We're going to see what happens. And Walt Weiss kind of acknowledged that, like, this is the first time through the order. And after that, there's no guarantee you're going to get all 3 of these guys up and to open an inning. Ronald leading off an inning. Just not guaranteed to happen. And so I do think if you go with Baldwin at 2, having Profar like 4th or 5th, he was 4th on Sunday. Maybe you put him 5th behind Riley. I could see a scenario where Profar ends up kind of being the leadoff man for the bottom half of the order if he bats 5th. And then putting somebody like Michael Harris in the 9-hole, who, when he's on, which he wasn't a lot last year, when he's on, can run a pretty high batting average, even though he's not drawing walks, also means that Ronald has opportunities. And Weiss directly mentioned that. Quote, we'll try to have some guys in that 9 spot who can get on base for Acuña. We know that Michael Harris loves the 9-hole. We know that Walt Weiss cares at least a little bit about player preference. He said it with Ronald. So on Sunday, the lineup was a little bit different. It did not have Harris batting 9th. That lineup ended up being Harris batting 7th. Aaron Schunk was DHing batting 8th. And Mauricio Dubon was 9th. Schunk's not going to be the DH in the regular season. That was just a spring thing, right? So Dubon was in the 9-hole. Harris was batting 7th. We'll see what they choose to do a little bit. Like, I'll keep watching this in spring, obviously. Just because I like to track rosters and all that kind of, lineups and all that kind of dumb stuff. But I'm really curious to see how they handle this. In just a minute, let's talk about the actual games. What we learned, what we saw, the StatCast data on some of these guys. We'll do that next, right here on Braves Today. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanTrax. Fantasy baseball season is coming quickly. There's only a few spots left in the Braves Today Fantasy League. If you want to join, you can hop into our Discord. Links in the episode description. We have a channel in there just for it, but it's hosted on FanTrax because FanTrax is the best platform for fantasy baseball. It is by far the deepest player pool. If you're trying to do your draft, they can configure slow drafts, fast drafts. There's a ton of options to customize the scoring in your league, the roster setups, the schedule. Ton of different ways that you have to coordinate and set that up. So, fantrax.com/Braves today is the link to go to join. Again, fantrax.com/Braves today to get started for free with FanTrax. Welcome back to Braves Today. Lindsey Crosby. Let's talk about the two games the Braves played over the weekend. Wins and losses don't matter. I don't even think when I wrote the Northport report at the end of each day that I even mentioned the scores of these games because the scores don't matter in spring. What does matter is overall general trends, right? Things that we notice not only this time, but going forward throughout spring if they continue to happen. Saturday, your major leaguers who made the trip were Mike Yastrzemski, Eli White, Jorge Mateo, and Jonah Heim. All guys who we expect to make the major league roster. They all made the trip. Jorge Mateo had a rough day. He didn't play the entire game, and these guys ever do. But he went 0 for 3, grounded out twice, flew out once. Looked okay at shortstop, I guess, but just didn't have a great day. Who did have a great day, though? Mike Yastrzemski and Ben Gamel, who's trying to make the roster for the outfield as a non-roster invitee. Yastrzemski goes 2 for 2, hits a home run, ends up scoring 2 runs, has an RBI, he walks. Ben Gamel goes 2 for 2 with both a double and a homer, scores twice, drives in 3, also draws a walk. So both those guys looking pretty good early. Carlos Carrasco got the start on Saturday. Barely broke 90 with his fastballs, but still had 2 scoreless innings, had 3 strikeouts, and provided he just doesn't continue to let his changeup get crushed. He had 3 batted balls on the changeup, and 2 of those were hard hit. One of those was just rocked. It feels like Carrasco is kind of in the perfect spot of he's a major league veteran who's probably not going to opt out and go look for a guaranteed major league job. But if you need him to make a spot start, call him up for a doubleheader or whatever, he can get you through 5 innings, right? Not anything impressive, but he can get you through 5. Hayden Harris and James Karinchak both made appearances on Saturday. Harris got 3 whiffs on 8 swings against the fastball. You may remember in his short major league debut last year, Hayden Harris didn't get a single whiff on his fastball. I talked on the show about how it is a really unique pitch as far as the approach angle and everything goes, and it plays up from its velocity. But major league hitters were not fooled by it last year. He got 3 whiffs on 8 swings against it on Saturday. James Karinchak looked really good. 20 inches of induced vertical break on his fastball, so better than his numbers back when he was actually good. The curveball looked pretty decent. He was able to land it for a strike, except for the one that just flew out of his hand. So that was nice. They didn't play John Heel at shortstop. They played, when they went ahead and swapped to the backups, Jim Jarvis played short. John Heel played third. So that was a little frustrating that they talked about him making the trip and getting some reps, but we didn't get to see him at short. That also continued on Sunday because he got into Sunday's game as well, but Alex Lodis was the shortstop. So we still have not got to see John Heel actually play defense, which is a little frustrating. But Sunday's game, Chris Sale made the start. 2 scoreless innings, 2 singles, but he struck out 2. Averaged 95 on the fastball, touched 96. He's doing exactly what he needs to do to be ready for opening day. If I remember correctly, either the guy who started Atlanta's first spring training game or the guy who started the spring home opener has usually ended up being the opening day starter. So Chris Sale's the clubhouse favorite to start on opening day. Did nothing to discourage that idea on Sunday. J.R. Ritchie came in after Sale. 2 innings, scoreless, hitless. He walks 1. He strikes out Trevor Larnach looking. Gets through it clean. And I honestly, it made me feel good and not at the same time, if that makes sense. He threw all 6 of his pitches. Remember, he throws all 3 fastballs. He has a sinker, cutter, 4-seamer. Throws a curveball, throws a slider, and a changeup. Threw all 6 pitches. He got 2 whiffs on 14 swings. So I don't love that. I kind of wish he would have missed a little bit more bats. Didn't get a ton of chase on any of those either. So, again, don't love that. But Stuff Plus liked everything. It had most of his stuff over 100. The sinker was a 96. The changeup was a 93. Stuff models never really like changeups because stuff models are grading pitches based off of velocity and movement. Changeups are intentionally thrown with less velocity, and they're relying more on the velocity difference than absurd movement most of the time to get their results. So Stuff Plus models don't love changeups anyway. But outside of that, everything else was over 100. The 4-seamer was a 104. The cutter was a 101. The curveball was a 104. The slider was a 109. He only threw 2 of those, too, in like 32 pitches. That was the other thing. None of his pitches were over 28% usage. Curveball was 1, sinker, then changeup, then cutter, then 4-seamer, then slider. Clearly, some of that matters based on handedness, but he mixed everything well. He allowed 4 balls to get put into play. None of those were hard hit. The average exit velocity was 78.8 miles an hour on the batted balls. And that's really the kind of trick here for Richie. That's the secret. All of these pitches were moving really well laterally, right? Nothing was on the barrel. 3 of those batted balls, there was again 4, 3 of them were ground balls. Of the 4 batted balls he allowed, 3 were ground balls. The 4th one was a soft liner. I think it was to Ozzie, if I remember right. And so, yeah, he's not getting a ton of chase. He's not getting a ton of whiff. But guys aren't getting good swings on these pitches. A college coach I talked to once called that he's taking the sting out of the swing, right? Like the goals, the development goals, the way that it works is 1, throw strikes. Level 1 is throwing strikes. Level 2 is softening the contact, taking the sting out of the swing. Level 3 is getting the whiffs. And Richie's clearly going just off of this at level 2. And honestly, if you needed J.R. Richie to make a major league spot start in the first week of the season, I think he could handle it. I think he could get through 5 innings, maybe even a 6th, who knows, and be fine. Do I think he's ready for a rotation spot? Probably not. But honestly, for a guy that has 98 1/3 innings in the upper minors, he has less than 1 season in the upper minors, AA and AAA together. He's more advanced than maybe a lot of other guys in that situation would be. So I'm a little more reinforced now in the thought that, yes, we are going to see J.R. Richie at some point in time in 2026. Yes, you have to make a 40-man move to add him, but it feels pretty likely we are going to see him in 2026. So you love that. Garrett Bowman, the pitching prospect, is getting the start on the road against Baltimore on Monday. So first time he'll be under StatCast. We'll get StatCast data. He's the 6'8" kid, remember, who doesn't miss enough bats. We'll get him, doesn't attack hitters enough in the zone and getting the whiffs. He tries to get chases and things like that. Anyway, we'll get him on StatCast. Spencer Strider, I talked about this in the Northport Report on Saturday. Spencer Strider was lined up to make 2 straight road starts, both against Baltimore. And so instead of pitching him today against Baltimore on the road, they're going to have Strider go to a backfield and let Bowman make the start. I'm guessing in that situation, Strider does make the next start against Baltimore, unless they just want him to be at home. I don't quite know exactly what the plan is there. The other thing really interesting that we learned about this is Mark DeRosa. And I actually missed this late in the week last week, or on Saturday. Mark DeRosa, former Braves player, current MLB Network guy who wanted the Braves managerial job and never got a call for it. He went on 680 The Fan and confirmed that last spring he was in Northport doing some promotional stuff for MLB around the Speedway Classic. So he was shooting some content with the Braves and things like that. And he talked to Chris Sale and asked Chris Sale if he would be on Team USA in the World Baseball Classic. And Chris Sale said no. In essence, Sale's response was that it wasn't the right timing for him to join the WBC. And this was going into last season. So this is before Sale got injured in 2025 and missed 2 months. This was Chris Sale coming off a Cy Young, turned down Team USA in the WBC to instead focus on that season with Atlanta. So I've had a couple people ask why there's no U.S. players on Team USA. And I guess now we know Chris Sale had the opportunity and declined. We don't know if anybody else on the Braves was asked to be on Team USA. But again, DeRosa did confirm he asked Chris Sale, and Chris Sale said no. That'll do it for Braves Today for Monday, February 23rd. Do me a favor. Listening on audio, 5-star review would be great. If you're watching on video, please subscribe to the channel. And BravesToday.com, free or paid, those memberships help us out a ton. We started putting some more things behind the paywall now that we've added Taylor, who was on Friday's show, and some other contributors and freelancers. Got to pay those guys somehow. So we're doing more things behind the paywall. So go sign up over there at BravesToday.com. Until next time, this has been Braves Today.